from newstalkzb.co.nz.
It's Mike Hosking.
I'll ask you Phil Goff's question. How much are you getting from the asset sales?
$5 to $7 billion. We don't know the exact number, and that's because it depends on exactly how much we sell down of the four assets. So we've said we'll keep a minimum of 51% forever, but it's always possible to sell 34% and keep 66%.
How much have you banked?
Well, $5 to $7 billion is built into the spreadsheet, and that's quite conservative. If you don't have a look recently, Fairfax, funnily enough, people talk about the mixed ownership model, and it's obviously an advertising campaign going the other way from Labour. But think about it just for a moment. We have the living example of that, Air New Zealand. The second thing is we're going to get that where we own 74%, the Crown and the private sector owns 26%. We're going to take that money out, put it into the future fund, buy other assets. We don't have to borrow for that. So at a time where there's global debt, the New Zealanders want more debt. And if you think about what's happening in the private sector, Fairfax own Trade Me. They've done just exactly the same thing we're proposing, keeping 66%, selling off 34%. It's valued Trade Me at just over $1 billion. It was 3 times oversubscribed by New Zealand and Australian investors.
What is to stop the shares in these companies ending up being owned by the Chinese?
Yeah, so the first thing is no one can get more than 10%. Secondly, ultimately, I think it's very unlikely that is going to happen because they can't get more than 10% anyway. But why would New Zealanders sell when you think about some of the investors?
Because the price goes up and that's what they do?
Well, but you've got a whole different investment profile now. You've got 1.8 million KiwiSaver accounts which are there for the long term. You've got a lot of fund managers basically who want to invest for the long term. You've got the New Zealand Super Fund. And in the weekend there was an article in the paper from Tower Investments saying not only do they think it will be massively oversubscribed by New Zealanders, but they think they'll hold them for a very long time.
Why then, having said that, haven't you been able to sell this properly? Why aren't people embracing it?
Well, firstly, I might sort of slightly reject that proposition. National is polling.
There's not a poll out there that says that people support this.
Well, they get asked it depends what question you ask in polls, because when people talk about asset sales, they talk about the asset sales that Phil Goff did when he was in government, which has flogged the whole lot.
You and I have argued this all year, and this has been your
Yep.
standard answer, which is fair enough, but
Yep.
you've had a whole year to sell this to get people on board. They simply aren't.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think when people look at the options, which are to not be investing in assets which are critically important for our future, or borrowing $16 billion more. If you went to New Zealanders and said, would you like to borrow another $7 billion in the world's markets where debt is a major issue, and that's what's dragged down Italy and Greece and Ireland and Portugal and Spain, or would you like to build no new infrastructure at all for the next 5 years, but by the way, pretend we're going to be a growth economy, or would you like to have the Air New Zealand model operating in a few more companies? Then I think you get a different answer. And if it's such a bad model, can someone explain to me why Labour created Air New Zealand like that, and why Phil Goff isn't campaigning in this campaign to buy back the 26% we don't own?
The weakness of your argument beyond these sales, though, is what's your next trick when we're next in the crap? You haven't got anything left to sell.
Well, firstly, that's a nonsense argument as well, because again, I've heard the Phil Goff numbers on the dividends. So he goes around saying it's
selling next time.
Well, let's just go back through this point for a moment. He says it's $1 billion. Well, as he proved on TV last night, he's not great with his numbers. So the five. Now it happens. Maybe we'll buy him a calculator. But the five SOEs that are involved here, have a dividend flow of $380 million. So he can do the maths like I can. If we keep 51%, that means we lose dividends in the order of $170 million, right? So we lose $170 million. We're not borrowing $7 billion.
Understand that.
So it's a very different deal.
Understand that. What do you sell next time, though?
Well, come back and ask me in 2014.
Is that when we're next in the crap?
We're not entirely doing this because we're in the crap, to put it in your
Yes,
terms.
you are. That's exactly what
No.
you've explained all along. We're borrowed up to the eyeballs. Here's how we're going to solve our problem. We're selling assets.
We're saying there is a number of things. One, debt is a big issue. And I don't think New Zealand, over the next 3 to 4 years, should be adding an additional $16 billion.
That's your argument. We understand that. But Bill English has said we will be here again financially. So what's your answer then?
Yeah, the answer is get your books back in surplus this by 2014-15.
But they won't always be. When you're next in trouble, you know we're going to be in trouble again. What's your answer then?
Yeah, so there's a broader issue here though. I think these companies perform better. I think New Zealand investors need somewhere to invest. I think the stock market will be stronger, and I think you'll have a better operating system if we do this. So it's not just a matter of releasing capital, although I think that is very important in the current environment. But all I can tell you is, look, one thing the Christchurch earthquakes taught me is that in the end, when there is an issue of a significant scale, all roads lead to the ninth floor of the beehive, because nobody else has the capacity to fund that. So when again the sort of coalition of the unwilling on the other side of us decide that they want to spend a hell of a lot more money, the bit they're not telling you is you just get more and more in debt and you're more and more vulnerable. And we're a party that in the election year had the courage, I think, to go out there and say it's a zero budget.